This episode contains sensitive discussions about eating disorders and substance abuse. Please take care while listening.
Emily, how do you feel when you hear the word shame?
Oof. How do I feel when I hear the word shame? You know what's really weird? This is awful. It feels like everything female to me.
No, I know. I feel like shame shows up for women in so many ways, and shame about our bodies and our lives often keep us silent. So I'll say my greatest source of shame out loud. My life does not look how I thought it would look at this age. I don't have kids and I'm not married. And I feel ashamed of that every day.
You seriously feel ashamed about that every day?
Yes.
I feel bad that every time friends of mine who have kids, I think in my head, I'm like, thank fucking God I don't have kids. But anyways, we're different.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if it's like an actual thing I feel, or I just feel like so judged that haven't done it, or
like the expectation that you're supposed to, and you're running out of time. And
I'm running out of time, and all of that. You're listening to The Whisper Network. I'm Katie Boland.
And I'm Emily Hemsher.
On this show, we want to break open the whisper network that is women's bodies. And in talking about all of the things that we usually whisper about, we've realized there's one thing that they all have in common.
Shame.
We put a call out for anonymous stories about the role that shame plays in your life.
Ooh, how does shame not show up in my life? Every time I try to make something happen, I screw it up in some way and then live in that shame of nothing will ever go right. I am the reason for my failure.
I got married when I was really young, and within 3 years, that marriage was over. I came from, quote, a good Christian home, and I got a divorce. The shame of that has stuck with me.
Oh, here's an example that is currently happening. I missed a call that I set up this morning and have spent the last exactly 1 hour self-flagellating because I left 6 other people waiting without any kind of notice. And immediately the shame of, I can't do anything right. I'm letting everyone down.
That last one in particular resonates with me because I feel like if I fucked something up, I immediately feel that I need to fix it and regain control.
Oh, yeah.
So like if I feel ashamed or if that's coming up in my body, I'm like, well, control, fix it, do something to make it go away or act better, or it's about control for me.
Oh my God, same. And that it's a mess. It's too much.
Clean it up.
Yeah. And contain it, and I'm not being disciplined enough. I'm not being, like, that it's my fault too. And I don't want anyone to know, about the thing, or that it's my fault. Like, just, shame. Oof. The first thing that goes in me, like, if I'm stressed or whatever, is my voice. So there's something to me about saying things out loud, which is so ultimately cathartic, but is so shameful. What are you ashamed of that you don't think you should be ashamed of?
Well, I'm ashamed of a lot that I shouldn't be.
Isn't that the essence of shame in a way?
I'm Catholic. No. I
am too. I wonder if a lot of that, I feel guilty and ashamed.
I feel guilty and ashamed. It is also a symptom, if you feel like often shame or guilt is a symptom of depression, which I do have, even though I'm medicated and it's better. But yeah, I feel, well, just a funny thing that I'm quite ashamed of, but now I'm going to be like, okay, I'm not going to be anymore. It's like, I'm ashamed of any drunk text I've ever sent to an ex, but I'm not anymore. That was a long time ago, and boys, you're welcome that you heard from me.
But that is the essence of this thing, that like the minute you voice shame, you can't be ashamed of it anymore because people know.
Yes, and it's like, oh, what am I ashamed of today? I'm ashamed I haven't worked harder. I'm ashamed I ate X, Y, or Z thing. And it's like, hey, those things are just pure mental illness and insanity. So even saying them out loud, when you say them, you're like, okay, that's nuts.
Yeah.
So that helps. Emily, how does shame shape your behavior?
Oh, I mean, it makes me hide and not do things. I mean, I can see it very much in just weight. Like if I'm ashamed of that I've put on weight or something, I will not go to things. I will make excuses for stuff. And then whenever I lose weight, then I start to think of all the ways I could have been better, like all the opportunity I missed because of, it just makes me disappear.
Yeah. I think that it drives tons of my behavior that is maybe positive. Like it makes me do all the things I would be too ashamed of not doing. But that's not a healthy motivation. So I'm working on that. And then how it shapes it in a negative way is like, yes, I would say I isolate or I disappear. But also there's moments when I just feel like, fuck this, and I act out.
Oh, that's so interesting because, I didn't think about that, but it's so true about shame being a motivator in my life. I think one of the things I feel most guilty about that I know is like the most insane thing is feeling like I haven't done enough. I haven't done enough work. And anyone who knows me is like,
that's all you do.
That's all you do. Like you do nothing else.
I'm the exact same. I'm the least productive person. I know I don't do anything. I've not done anything in my life.
Yeah. If I have a day where
you take the day off or to relax or something.
No, I won't do that. The only time I feel like I'm okay is when the world is on vacation.
Yeah, you enjoyed COVID for that.
I did. I'm ashamed of how much I enjoyed COVID and wish for it back without any of the death and sickness. But I wish for that time back where I felt like I had time and I could control it.
I had a similar experience when I had a surgery on my neck, and it's the only 2 weeks I've taken off in the past 10 years. And I loved every second of it.
Do you know that the thing I fantasize about, like when people fantasize about vacations and stuff, I fantasize about either being in the hospital. To put this out there, I don't want to actually be sick or something, but to be in the hospital or to be in jail. Because to me, it's not my fault.
It's out of your control.
Or the minute a plane takes off, I'm like, oh.
I love being on planes.
Me too.
Yeah. It's the most relaxing time of my life.
Yes.
So obviously, shame is something that shows up for us in all sorts of different ways. There's body stuff, sex stuff, work stuff. And this quote from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie really resonated with us. We teach girls shame. Close your legs, cover yourself. We make them feel as though being born female, they're already guilty of something. And so girls grow up to be women who cannot say that they have desire. They grow up to be women who silence themselves.
That's a good quote. Our guest today is someone who is quite amazing at channeling the dark energy of shame into her art and wants to break the toxic cycle.
Jowita Bydlowska is a writer whose work spans both fiction and memoir, but it's always frank, fearless, and very vulnerable. In 2013, her memoir, Drunk Mom, was a controversial bestseller that confronted the uncomfortable topic of motherhood and addiction. She's also written several award-winning novels. The most recent one is called Monster, which is about a young mother in a toxic relationship.
She also has a really great Substack newsletter called Unshaming, which is like the best title ever. I'm so jealous of that title.
Yeah, I know. And it's absolutely worth signing up for. I've gotten so much out of that Substack. Jowita's a friend of mine, and she's here to talk to us about shame, female hunger in all its forms, and the monsters that motivate us, and how healed we have to be to talk about what hurts us. So thank you so much, Jowita, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so to dive in. One of the biggest themes that is driving Emily and I in making this podcast is the idea of shame. So the shame that we all carry as women around our bodies, around the female experience. And obviously with your newsletter, a lot of the stuff you write about, that theme shows up in almost all of your work. What does shame mean to you?
Wow. Okay. So I have a new book coming out next year, which is called Unshaming. And this is a book that examines shame through sort of the lens of my biggest shame, which has to do with addiction and also specifically relapse. But the reason why I wanted to tackle that subject was because I like the subjects that I don't see around and I don't, encounter often. And I was trying to think of, what was underlying all of my sort of issues, whether female issues or stuff to do with addiction or anything else. And it always boils down to shame. So I tend to write and explore things that I'm uncomfortable with and things that I sort of want to get more information on myself. And so, for me, shame, maybe not shame, but unshaming has to do with being seen, because I find that shame is all about secrecy and hiding and lying and sort of, wearing a mask and all those things. But the moment we allow ourselves to be seen, whether by talking to another person or publishing a whole memoir about addiction or anything else, that shame doesn't necessarily get destroyed, but it becomes a lot smaller and easier to handle. And also sort of a byproduct of that is that you tend to find people who whether relate to it or, or have similar experiences. So it's about lack of connection, and then unshaming would be about sort of getting those connections back and sort of owning all your stuff too.
I realize you can't be ashamed in a group or with another person of the same thing, because the minute you connect with somebody who has the same thing that you are ashamed of, you would never tell them to be ashamed of it.
That's right.
So it instantly, and like you said, shame does live in the dark and in secret. And the minute you shine a light on it, it like can't survive.
Yeah.
Do you find writing helps you deal with your shame?
Yeah, I've been asked that before, if my writing is like cathartic to me, if it's a form of therapy. And I used to say, no, it's not. Absolutely. I'm just sort of, I'm an artist. This is what I do. But then I thought, well, I'm making art out of sort of my own experiences. And it is a form of maybe not therapy, but it's certainly cathartic. So I want to take that back. But also, when I was researching for this book, Unshaming, I found a lot of stuff about journaling, which I used to be so against journaling. I thought it was very twee and new agey and like, I don't want to journal. Like I write enough. But then sort of putting things on paper and being able to read them back to yourself is very healing. It can be very healing. So maybe it's not my sort of first drive, but it's certainly there. Yeah.
I find reading about other people's shame is very helpful to me. Kind of like that thing when you connect with somebody, you see somebody else has the same thing as you. Yeah. When did you first recognize that it was shame in your life, that like you were saying before, all these things led to one core issue, which was shame, but like when was the first time you named it?
Probably with my memoir. Addiction and motherhood are both things that are sort of kept secret. So I was walking around with a baby and sort of trying to hide the fact that I was drinking, but also hiding the fact that I was struggling with being a mom. And I felt so incredibly isolated. And of course, I was ashamed of the fact that I was an alcoholic mother taking care of a baby. And I just thought, if I continue, like I'm probably going to die, because no one's going to know, no one's going to help me. And I'm going to sort of be known only to myself. And that's what's going to kill me. So maybe that I want to say that this is the first time when I identified it. And the second sort of big breakthrough was with writing this new book. And I tried to think like, I accumulated a lot of shame since Drunk Mom. And then I thought, okay, what's my biggest other shame? And it was the fact that I was sort of a poster child for sobriety. Meanwhile, I was relapsing over and over and, not talking about it again and hiding too, because I was sort of publicly known as someone who tackled these issues and healed, and people were writing to me saying, oh, your memoir helped me get sober, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, I was like, it's all a lie. Yeah. Well, not a lie, but it's like, I am lying.
Yeah. So I really relate to that, because I feel like I'm also very public about being sober, but then there's always like a whack-a-mole of like, well, what's the next self-destructive thing that I'm going to do that people will look at me like, you've got it all figured out. I'm like, no, I don't at all.
Whack-a-mole, that's such a good analogy.
Like, and so my next question, to bring us back to your book that's just come out, Monsters. So the lead character, who has your name, I think one of the most profound or basic ways that women experience shame, it can manifest in body dysmorphia. I know I suffer from that like hugely. It's like what I spend most of my time thinking about. Why did you want to explore this creatively, and how has body dysmorphia shown up in your life?
Can I ask you a question back though?
Yes, of course.
When you say you spend most time thinking about it, like what are you thinking about? Just the way, like what you look like to people, or what it like?
Yeah, just like, am I bigger? Am I smaller?
Okay.
What I look like to people. It's just a fixation, or feels like a tick in my mind that just does not go away. And it was actually easier when I was still drinking. Like, I'm very sick in this way. So when I was reading Monsters, that part spoke to me so much, even how the protagonist has color-coded foods. Some are safe, some are unsafe. And I was like, wow, I'd love to dig deeper on like, where did you find the strength to write about this? Because it is very shameful. And can you speak to your own experiences with it if you have them?
Well, I didn't want to write about drinking again because I feel like
I'm bored of that.
Yeah. But then I also thought like, what was my other, whack-a-mole other issue? And then I thought, well, I took up so much space with this addiction stuff. I don't want to sort of move into the eating disorder, body dysmorphia stuff. But a lot of it, time is connected. Like it's all, again, it's about hiding. So I also, yes, I have struggled with that when I was younger, but also like even, it's funny that you say that it was easier when you were drinking, but I remember even when I was drinking and doing really badly, I still like really cared about what I look like because there was all this like, I called it sort of dressing up a corpse because I was like totally dead inside, but I wore really nice clothes. I got my nails done and it was like this performance almost that I was engaging in. And then with this particular book, like I was also curious about like, is it me that's looking at myself and deciding that, I'm not fitting a certain standard, or is it male gaze, or is it something else? Is it like the society, etc.? And then I also thought about like the things that we grew up with. Like you're younger than me, Katie, so I don't. But like
not by much.
But I grew up with sort of Kate Moss was like the ideal, like the
heroin chic.
Yeah, and then like the space between your thighs was like you got 10 out of 10 points for that. There was all this point system. It's interesting because we also think like, especially with body dysmorphia and eating disorders, we think, oh, this is a teenage girl's sort of young woman thing, but it's not. Like it sort of morphs into different things. And, my character talks about that the only time she felt comfortable was when she was pregnant, because it was the only time where her body didn't belong to her. It was her body had a purpose and a use. And I took that from my own life because I remember that was the only time that I allowed myself to eat like French, like whatever. Like I didn't care about food and I didn't count calories. I didn't add them. And then as soon as the baby was out, I had someone in my family say, oh, don't worry, you're going to lose weight soon enough. Like it was just like one of the first comments. And I was like, isn't that interesting that this is the most like important thing to mention to me as a young mom? But anyway, this is just to say that like I feel that we almost never stopped struggling with it. And then I had like, my mother-in-law was, in her 70s. And she was like, I remember she was sort of looking at her plate and deciding what she was going to eat and what she was going to leave out. And I thought, oh my God, this is never ends.
This is the Whisper Network. We'll be right back. It's so interesting that you say the only time you were kind of good to yourself in a way was when you were pregnant. And I used to think I only wanted to be pregnant so I could have an excuse to eat things and get bigger. Or I know when I played this part in a movie where I was playing an overweight character, it was the only time I allowed myself to just eat normally, like a normal person. And that just makes me think of when we were talking earlier about shame and how when you find someone else with the same kind of shame, it dissipates. And that as women, we can never be good to ourselves. We can never be like just as we would be with our baby or with a friend.
Yeah. I was thinking too, like, because I was sort of rereading what I have written in the book, and there's a moment where my character is in this sort of love bubble with this new lover that she meets, just this tiny scene where she looks in the mirror and she doesn't recognize her. Like, it's not that she doesn't recognize herself. She thinks, who is this person wearing my skin? Like, her body dysmorphia is so complete that she can only sort of see herself through the eyes of her lover, but she has no idea what she looks like. And I found that a lot of the time for myself. Like, even getting ready for this morning, I was like, what am I going to wear? Because I'm like, they're both actresses, so they're probably really tiny. So I have to, like, it's crazy, but I'm just saying this out loud now, but I'm like, that was sort of in the back of my head. And then I called my best friend, and I'm like, she's like, stop it, like, you're insane. But it's like,
but it's interesting.
I took time getting ready this morning. I was like, what should I wear? Like, what would look good if in front of these women who I admire. And Emily and I are really good friends. And still I was like, what would Emily think was cool? Yeah. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But then your thought of like, they're both actresses. They're probably both really tiny. Like that's this idea.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately this leads to my next question. It's like, so you're obviously very smart. You're extremely beautiful. You've won tons of awards. You're so talented. And I'd argue that similar to me, you can be self-destructive. Mm-hmm. So where does that monster come from within you? Like the thing that feeds the I don't look good enough, or I'm not thin enough, or the why we want to drink, or like how do you live with it versus succumb to it, or how do you use it as a creative outlet?
It's a good question. I think it's just lack of permission to myself to allow myself to, feel success or whatever, like all these things, and accept compliments, for example. Like it's, that joke about there's nothing like a confident middle-aged white man. Like, it's like to have a confidence. I'm like, just one day or like just a couple hours. I would love
just
that.
try it
right?
on.
Like,
Yeah.
And I even, I remember going on my first book tour and being with male and female authors, and just the different ways in which male and female authors talked about the books that just came out was like so illuminating, because there was one author, male author, who was like, oh my God, my book is amazing, and I'm writing a new one. And then, then there was me and like others kind of just ashamed of this thing that we put out, that it was like, oh, it's nothing, It's like, so yeah, I don't know. So I think I forgot your question. But
but about you don't give yourself permission to go to the dark parts.
Yeah.
So to that point, this is something that you said to me earlier that I found really interesting. Is like you labeled monsters and potentially your next book autofiction. So memoir is often, I find, to be a form of female expression that people act like is shallow or superficial, or who are you to be telling your story as a woman? How does it feel to be a woman who writes about herself, and what reactions do you get? And can you say more about why you chose to make your book autofiction?
I wanted to say that when Drunk Mom came out, some of the worst criticism came from women, which was really interesting. So female journalists, and then, various people who, like I remember there was a female journalist who wrote a whole, I think it was an interview, a column that she wrote, and she did not name me by name, but she said, we have these books by all these bad girls turned good, and it's so oversaturated, and like she just really dismissed it. And I thought, yeah, I agree with you. Like this is, and just like even dismissive terms that we have for memoir, it's like, it's not chick lit, but it's like, sad lady writing. Like I call that whatever. Yeah, so that was, so I really took that to heart for a while. And then I was like, no, actually, I think I did a good job, but it only took, probably 10 years, and a lot of people telling me that, that it was meaningful, that it was not just like me sort of disclosing there was a comment recently, something about my sorted writing or something. Oh, here goes Jowita again with her sort of exhibitionism and stuff. So we have all these words, like exhibitionism is another one, right? Like, just lack of privacy and lack of control, and like you have to reveal everything. So it's it just makes it look so ugly. And it's funny that you say that it's like women's sort of territory is memoir. I don't know if it is, but sort of going back to your other question about autofiction. So that was a sort of tongue-in-cheek why I called my book autofiction, and I think was in a conversation with my publisher. So we were trying to figure out, like, what should we sort of classify it as? And I said, well, a lot of it is based on sort of my experiences, but I'm like, wouldn't it be fine if you just called it autofiction? Because I'm sure if people ask me about this book, they're going to ask me if I wrote about myself again, because apparently women cannot come up with stories on their own. They always write about themselves. They always talk about themselves, especially someone who has written a memoir. This must be about me again. So we sort of ran with it. So it's autofiction. It's not about me. And then sure enough, I just came back from a small book tour, and people were asking, is this based on your story? And then I found myself trying to find, events and experiences in my life that would sort of align with this assumption. And I did. But I mean, I think we always ultimately write about ourselves to some extent. We almost ultimately write and perform and show the truth. And however we dress it up, it's doesn't really matter. But yeah, I don't know if
it's interesting though. Autofiction might, to me, it would give me permission to write about myself. And like you talked about before, like this still is sticking in my head, that idea of permission. Whereas I see this in my life all the time with guys that they'll direct their first movie because they feel totally entitled to. They like, why it's weird of them to think why they wouldn't. And for us, we're always like, what are we supposed to do? Can we do it? But there was this part early in your book where you say, I just want to one day not be hungry for anything or anyone. And that hit me where I fucking live. I just feel like this thing of female hunger, at least maybe as my therapist keeps saying this, that it seemed this like embarrassing thing to me that it's like wanting the mother's nurturing or I don't know. And then he always tells me that I've done a need-ectomy, like that I don't want to need anyone, anything. And I'm wondering what your relationship is to female hunger. And it doesn't mean just food.
That's a great question. I mean, it's funny because I think like hunger versus appetite, right? Appetite is kind of cool and it's allowed and it shows that you're sort of like, you are interested and curious and you try to new things. And then hunger is like a little bit ugly and shameful too, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm just like needy. Yeah. Like I need to fill myself, I need to fill this hole. So like in Monster specifically, the hunger is for food and for sex and for sort of, I guess, acknowledgement. But the biggest hunger, to me at least, both hunger and appetite is for freedom.
But that hunger even needs to be, like you said, it is kind of the connotation of it feels ugly and needy and all that. But like, it kind of shouldn't be. That hunger, we all get hungry unless we've trained ourselves to suppress that.
Men can be hungry for food or for sex, and that's doesn't feel grotesque, but on women it does.
Yeah.
Another quote from the book that really hit us was how we pretend to be healed to talk about our sickness, but do we have to be healed to talk about them? And that just felt very profound to me because your protagonist is able to, not spoiling the book, but by the end she can talk about these things even if she's not fully healed. And you seem the same and I'm the same and Emily's the same. Like none of us are healed, but we're here talking about these things and maybe that lifts the whisper network or some of the shame. Your next project that you're working on is about bias in medicine, which is a topic that we're very keen to explore. So can you tell us about this? Tell us about this next project and how you got interested in this as a topic to explore creatively.
So that's just one part of it, but it came from that. So I mean, I like sort of analyzing characters. They're like, again, maybe a little bit hidden and shameful and all that. So starting with Drunk Mom and then through Monster, I thought, I don't know. I was thinking about like what sort of protagonists and maybe similarly people in film are like accepted and like who do we want to see on screen? Who do we want to read about? And I find it's always people like of a certain age, which is like, I don't know if it's under 35 for you guys, but even with writing, it's like, the messy drunk woman, like, or whatever, drunk or hungry or something, she can be older than like a certain age. And I thought, no, I don't know. I haven't read a lot of books about a woman in her 40s or especially mid 40s or late 40s. I'm like, so I wanted to write this character that would not only be sort of grotesque because of her advanced age, and I'm saying this quote unquote grotesque, and unsexy. Like I wanted her to explore, another sort of hunger or whatever, like specifically her sexuality and like, the lack of libido and all these things that she was going through because of perimenopause. So that's just sort of the character that I want to explore with this book. But specifically bias in medicine, that came from, again, my own experience because I was going through a female issue and I went to see a lot of doctors and I'm still seeing them because I still don't have any answers as to what's going on. So that sort of inspired the sort of underlying theme of this book. And, what's going on has to do with possibly perimenopause, possibly something else. I've heard that it's all in my head from one doctor. I'm doing a lot of my own research. So I give my character all those fun things to deal with. And so she's also going from doctor to doctor and she's exploring other things. And the sad and sort of, I think, realistic conclusion is that she finds answers on Reddit.
Oh my God! Did you write our podcast?
This is how we started the podcast.
Exactly how we started the podcast.
Yeah. That's how my book ends.
Yeah.
So she literally...
I think that's what most women are doing.
Yeah.
Because so many female issues, it's not only that the doctors don't know, it's that an answer doesn't exist.
The way you said female issues was like so how I see things. Like I'm embarrassed to say even what it is, or like female issues sounds shameful.
Yeah, but it's funny because I was like, I needed to resolve this conflict in my book, and I was like, well, where would she realistically find the answer? And I'm like, where I find the answers, which is
where we found the answer. So I guess to wrap up, what do you hope people who read Monster take away from it? Maybe a woman who has some of the same problems we have.
Well, no, I always hope that it's, first of all, entertaining, and that goes for any sort of work of art. But also, it's funny because I always try to like figure out what the audience thinks when I do public readings and when I talk to readers. I was really surprised at how shocked still a lot of people were about sex scenes in it. I kept hearing like, oh my God, there's so much sex in it. And so I don't know, there's not a lot of reviews out there yet, but I've already had like some feedback saying, I would read this book, but there's too much sex. So I'm just like,
Too much? Really?
That was one of my favorite parts of the book, is I thought, like, I loved the whole book, but I thought that the sex scenes were written like how you would read sex scenes in a man's book. So
yeah, but also
but
like
just like as a part of life, like it wasn't a big deal. It was a part of the way that people connect.
Are they really descriptive?
To some extent, but the point is like that
they're good. Yes.
Yeah. No, well, you said, Katie. Like, I just want people to read this book and sort of accept it as this is part of life. And in that vein, I sort of like, I write about food and I write about sex in it, and I'm like, both are activities that we all engage in, and so I don't know. I'm hoping that my readers will. I don't know if they will get inspired, but certainly, I think one of the things that I was sort of curious about too was if that book would possibly help anyone who is in a difficult, toxic relationship as well, with somebody else or with themselves too.
Do you feel like, are you still drawn to toxic relationships, or do you feel past that at this point in your life and now you can just write about them?
No,
yeah.
Please, all the red flags.
Yeah. Yes. I relate. Do you have something that you would like to tell your younger self?
Yes, I do. Lots of things. But maybe I would have told her to like stick with the recovery and not try to experiment more. But that's, whatever. I wouldn't have another book out of it.
Exactly. Sometimes you have to go through it.
No, that's why I'm like, it's kind of pointless to have regrets. But I don't know.
No regrets. That's great.
This is the Whisper Network. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much to Jowita Bydlowska. That gave us a lot to think about for future episodes.
There were so many things I wanted to ask her because she brought up so many things, but I didn't want to interrupt. But I feel like I wish we had longer.
Me too. I feel like so much of what she writes about in Monster, which is such a phenomenal book, was almost hard for me to read because I related so closely to the body dysmorphia, the shame, having issues with hunger, feeling like hunger is grotesque in any way, whether that's sexually or just for food or just a hunger for life. And I find her to be so brilliant and so brave. So I'm really, really grateful that we got to talk to her today. What part of the conversation struck you deepest?
Just the relationship between hunger, sex, shame, and motherhood. At one point she said, when I asked her where she found, like when she named shame, when she knew it was, and she had said it was addiction and motherhood or becoming a mother, because nobody talks about it. And it just reminded me of so many friends of mine who have had kids and stuff. I was playing a mother with postpartum depression, and so I did a lot of research, and there's so much of it that like no one tells you. There's just something that was so interesting to me with the connection between hunger, how we don't give ourselves anything. Like when she said the only time she like ate and stuff was when she was pregnant, and that we only do things for someone else. We don't feel like we have permission to be good to ourselves, feed ourselves, have sex, enjoy it, anything.
Yeah, that part really spoke to me too. And also what I find so interesting is in speaking to someone like my friend Jowita and Emily or any of the women in my Whisper network about any of these issues, I'm struck by how self-aware we all are. Oh. And still, like, we fall prey to so much self-hate or shame or self-abandon or all of these issues, and how unwilling we are to really talk about them. So that's a reason why I'm happy that we are doing this, but I'm also happy that there are artists like her writing books about these things that we all know we struggle from this. I'm not reading this like, whoa, shocked. I'm reading this like, whoa, that's me.
Yeah, that's so true, though, how self-aware we are. We totally are very self-aware.
I don't know a woman that isn't like pretty hyper self-aware as far as the way that she's self-destructive.
Yeah. Oof. That's a good quote.
What I found really interesting is when we were talking to her about being an author who writes about herself and the reactions that she got as a woman doing that, because I do the same thing. I write about myself a lot in my work, and even talking about making this podcast, I've gotten like some very interesting reactions, mainly from men.
Oh, like what?
Like, what do you know about the medical system? Like, or
nothing, because
nothing.
No one knows
Nobody
anything.
does. None of
and
us
that's
know.
Why we're doing
That's the point. Like, completely missing the point of the whole thing. Or like, if I say, oh, broadly, it's about misogyny in medicine, they're like, oh, you've experienced that? And I think that's a pretty consistent reaction women, particularly who write about themselves or write memoir or autofiction, get, which is interesting because I do not think men face the same.
Yeah. Well, talking about yourself in any way, it was interesting when she said she was on tour with those other male authors and the way they would talk about themselves as like, I wrote this great book, and how women make themselves smaller. I mean, it just goes way, way back.
And it goes into this podcast. It's like, like we're taught to whisper. We should be whispering when we're talking about ourselves or our issues or things we need help with. Like,
everything's secret.
Just keep it secret or keep it to yourself or just ask a few people. So let's stop that.
It really struck me when she said a lady problem. And it wasn't because we needed to know what that problem was. It was the tone of the way she said that, the way her body went was very familiar to me, and how anything female that I talk about, I put quotes around it and I bury it in my mouth and I make it quieter.
Yes. And this is a woman who writes with, you know, a lot of swagger and point of view about sex and her body, and very like sort of nakedly honest about issues that she's had, you know? So still it doesn't, same as you, like you're a really formidable person in the world, and still we feel like we have to whisper about these things or we don't want to be embarrassed by our bodies.
But that's so interesting that she writes about that stuff. I feel like I can write about things. Even in text, it feels much easier to write something to
I know that's
say,
true.
You know, that's true. Than to say it. But there's this certain, I made up this word that I'm trying to get in the dictionary, but I found out to get a word in the dictionary, other people have to use it a lot. So you have to give away your word. But anyways, it's distimacy. And it's like, I feel the most intimate when there is a distance between me and the other person I'm being intimate with.
Yes.
And that is like writing. Yeah.
Distimacy.
You're not going to use it, are you?
I like it. Everyone listening use it too.
I wrote to the dictionary people, and they said that for something to be in the dictionary, it has to be used publicly.
Distimacy. We need to make this happen for Emily.
But then now I'm kind of disappointed because when it happens, it's not going to be mine anymore.
But you came up with it, so it is always yours in a way.
I guess so. I'm sure somebody else did too. Anyways, yeah, that was
a very profound and moving conversation. I felt it was almost like looking in a mirror a little too much, because I relate like too much to all her issues are issues that I've had. But again, it's like, it's good that we're talking about it because it's exactly what you and she said. It's like it becomes less shameful when you are talking about it with somebody.
There's this amazing quote from Brené Brown that really resonates with everything we've been talking about today. Shame derives its power from being unspeakable. That's why it loves perfectionists, us. It's so easy to keep us quiet. If we cultivate enough awareness about shame to name it and speak to it, we've basically cut it off at the knees. Shame hates having words wrapped around it. If we speak shame, it begins to wither. This is my favorite part of the quote. This is the whole point of the quote. Just the way exposure to light was deadly for the gremlins. Language and story bring light to shame and destroy it.
I love that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast, to bring those gremlins of shame into the light and destroy them by sharing our stories. And I also want to share one last voice note we received that leaves us on a very positive note.
I've actually given up quite a lot of shame in the last few years. After I realised I was asexual during the pandemic, I realised that a lot of the shame I felt about being still a virgin in my 30s kind of just dissipated, because I realised I didn't actually care. and letting go of that has been really liberating, and to the point that I feel much more in my body and present than I ever did.
I love that. May all our shame dissipate so we can all let go and just feel present.
And that is our episode. Thank you so much to Jowita Bydlowska, my friend, our friend, award-winning author.
Wait, she can be my friend now?
Yes.
I am obsessed with her. Yeah, thank you for listening. And what else? What?
See you next time on the Whisper Network.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. I'm Katie Boland.
And I'm Emily Hampshire. Every time we do this, getting a little more into being here. I was very into being here today.
See? Progress, growth.
Next time on the Whisper Network.
I think the sort of existential thing that people find surprising is probably how little is known and how much infantilizing there is, because one goes from feeling like an adult to then immediately feeling like a child in the medical system, and that's not very comfortable for a lot of women, and it is surprising.
The Whisper Network is produced by Antica Productions. Our senior producer is Allison Broverman. Samantha McLean is our development producer. Laura Reguer is our executive producer. And Sydney Fior is our production manager. This episode was sound designed by Philip Wilson, with theme music by Michael Boland. This podcast is hosted on Acast.